Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
Our guest this morning is Mr. Nahshon Cook. He is a classical horsemanship trainer and clinician of the French school. He holds to the adage, follow the horse and find heaven in every step as the golden rule. He is also the author of A New Beginning, The Killing Fields and Other Poems, Communion, and Being with Horses. Nahshon is a very spiritual guy, and if you notice anything different about him, he is, in fact, left-handed. It is on my bucket list to watch Blazing Saddles with Nahshon. Sean, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, man, I'm thankful for the day. The weather is finally starting to warm up. We've had snow on the ground here since Christmas, and the sun came out, and I mistakenly thought it was spring. So it's still very much winter here, but we've been so sun and warmth deprived that I thought it was spring and called the vet for spring vaccinations, and he reminded me that in fact we are still in February.
Oh, we have been in the mid-80s down here.
Oh, wow. It hasn't gotten above 60 since Christmas.
You know, we just did the clinic this past weekend, and we had to stop 3 times throughout the day for water breaks and stuff like it's July or something.
Wow.
You know, the horses have their winter coats on still, and it gets that warm, and
yeah.
they were, and the people needed water too. So
yeah, wow.
Well, we're gonna start this off as with all of the others with the lightning round questions. And Nahshon, keep in mind that these are 4 points, so you want to be on your ball here.
I got it.
All right. What is your favorite way to relax?
Reading.
Morning or evening?
Morning.
Bay or sorrel?
No preference.
Do you have any favorite color? You like paints or anything like that, or not a thing for you?
No, I'm not a thing for me at all.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No.
Do you cook
My nieces would beg to differ. They love pineapple on their pizza. I hate pineapple on my pizza. And no, I don't know how to cook.
Okay. Will you tell us something unexpected about you?
I lived in Asia for about 5 years.
If you could have any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
A really, really, really open heart.
If you could suddenly have some new skill or ability that just, blew things out of the water for you, what would that new skill or ability be?
Never remembering how to learn how to be afraid.
Thoughts or feelings?
Oh, I think they're the different sides of the same coin.
That's a very thoughtful answer. Are you decisive or indecisive?
Indecisive.
We can talk for that for a while.
I was decisive about being indecisive.
I like that. Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. What is the best ice cream flavor?
A mango sorbet.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur or deep-sea creature?
No.
Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Possibly.
We would all hope to not definitively be able to answer that one. Just so you know, about half of the people I've asked that question of think they've had, so it was way higher than I ever thought it would be. I just had that.
Look, that's one of those questions that whose answer I will not confirm or deny.
And the last question: do you have a particular horse that would be the one you would pick if you had to like ride into battle? Like this is the one I'll lay it all down for.
I think all of my horses would do that. All the ones that I have now, they're all warriors.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you 692 points, Nahshon, which I believe is a new record. High score.
That's awesome.
The lightning round questions, and that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment.
A genuine compliment?
Yes.
Well, I think those are both really, really wonderful practices of being human. So I will, whatever you choose, I will gladly accept.
Okay. Let me think here. I tell you what, I'll be pragmatic. Since I hardly have any voice, I'm going to choose awkward silence and save my words.
Okay. I'm game. You let me know when we're done.
Okay, that ought to do it. So,
all right.
Well, Nahshon, just for the people out there that might not be fully aware of who you are, would you give us kind of the 30,000-foot view of what it is that you do?
I don't know. A lot of my work now that I really enjoy doing, I train and I have regular students, but I really love taking like really difficult rehab cases and seeing if I can help make them better. And I do that through the use of dressage and the different practices of dressage, like in-hand work, long lining, riding, and trying to create movement patterns to help the body not be afraid to try to move in as healthy a way as possible again. And so it's a super fun life.
So really getting into the gymnastics aspect of dressage and the physical building up of the body and teaching balance and better ways of movement and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I on the physical, and then on the emotional part, is just kind of helping the horse learn not to be afraid of trying for the fear of pain, because of the fear of pain. Because I think it's about 50-50, half psychological and emotional work and half physical work. The body is easy to fix. It's the brain and the mind that are the challenge. Mm-hmm.
I don't do much rehab work type stuff, but I've definitely had horses that were in training that had some sort of injury, and there's always a period when they come back, even when they're pain free, they're still afraid to move that way again because they have an expectation of pain, and you
have it hurting. Yeah.
You really do have to kind of baby them through that till they get to the other side and realize that they're good now. So
yeah.
Well, the reason that you and I came into each other's orbit is because of the Best Horse Practices Summit that was in Lexington, Kentucky this past fall. You did a pretty neat demonstration there. You started off with a little black mare, and Amy Skinner was giving you some help, and it wound up that mare was a little bit off for the demonstration. So you wound up riding the little gray mare. I know that's been a few months ago now, but do you remember much about that demonstration and what you were trying to convey to the audience and all?
To be quite honest with you, I usually don't go into presentations with much of a plan. I try to that's just how I work. I try to be available to what's there so that I can meet the need that's most present. But that mare had a really, really strong distrust of the hand and of the bit and of the seat, and I think for a minute she thought that people were utter idiots. Um, and it may be founded or unfounded on her part. I can sometimes see it for either or also. um, um, but yeah, it turned out to be a really incredible experience, letting the horse know that the only pressure that she was feeling, that was the pressure she was putting on herself, and to help her realize that I wasn't who she was protecting herself from, and how when she did that, when she had that realization, the whole energy in the room changed, and I kind of blanked out for a bit, as sometimes happens, and I'm just kind of in my own world. And then I came back and everybody looked soft and quiet and relaxed, and some people were crying, and yeah, it was a pretty wonderful first experience of that sort for me.
Well, you certainly have a natural, well, I'm assuming a natural ability. Knowing you a little bit, I think it's pretty natural, but maybe you've cultivated it. But you have that ability to draw people into your world, and you're a very genuine sort of a guy. So I can see how the room sort of gravitated to you there.
Yeah.
I'm not a real emotional sort of a guy, so in a sense, you and I are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. But I was right there with you in that ride on that horse, and I think that's really great when people are a little bit different, but the horse kind of brings us together. Like everything you were doing, I could see it. It made sense. It was, it was obvious. So.
Yeah, and I think that I kind of look at emotion. I don't look at it. Tell me, what is your definition of emotion, and I'll know how I can proceed with what I'm about to say. What does that mean, emotional person?
See, I don't know. Like that's where I would have a hard time defining some of these things, which is part of why I'm not naturally, I don't gravitate towards.
Sure. Okay.
I like things that are easily definable. It's absolutely this. Most emotions can present in a variety of ways. They're kind of hard to pin down sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that for me, and I think that the mayor exhibited that kind of how I see the world. I think that the body is emotional memory. And I think that when I'm able to navigate those spaces of emotional memory and those tight spots, then that's the heart of my work. It's kind of reprogramming and giving horses and people options about how, if they like the way they're feeling or not, and if they don't like the way that they're feeling, like how long are they going to continue to feel that way if it's a choice, and then trying to navigate or create a way out of that into a different space. I think that for me, kind of how I see it in my work and how the horses have really helped me understand that, is that kind of like the brain, the body is everything really that the brain knows, and then the mind is the brain working. So like if I can change the way a horse is taking in information, if I can change the way they feel about how they're taking information in, and they don't feel like they have to protect themselves, then we're conditioning in different emotional responses to requests, and it becomes more of a dialogue. But it always starts off with me trying to understand how my questions are making the horse feel. And I always really like to know if the horse feels safe inside of my questions based off of whether they're willing to relax or not,
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I look at it. There's an opportunity for it to be super esoteric and abstract, but it's quite concrete for me. Like you can tell the way you can tell a horse's life and the way they feel about it by the way their bodies look, you know? And that's really valuable information, you know?
Sure. Well, this is a little out of order, but you and I were involved in a Q&A at the Best Horse Practices Summit, which they recently released on a podcast. And we had a little bit opposing answers to one of these questions. And that was, I'm going to paraphrase it here, but sort of the question of context. So here's this horse with a problem, and here is a 20-minute description of that horse's past. I generally land on the side of the fence of I don't really need or even necessarily want that description because I can't influence anything that already happened to the animal, and knowing some of the things that happened to the animal might influence me. And I would rather take that animal where it is right now today and make my own decisions about where that is and move forward how I see fit according to what the animal's telling me in real time.
Yeah. I think that I would agree with you for like a training situation. I think that so much of medical conditions are super important to me.
Sure. Yeah, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that in general, I will say that I agree that I think that stories sometimes pollute presence, they kind of skew our ability to see what is to be seen, because it's not always what happened to the horse, but it's how the person who's telling you what happened to the horse feels about what happened to the horse, and how they feel about the people who were involved in that happening to the horse. So in short, people generally fuck things up a lot. And as much as I don't have to have that information, I don't necessarily need it. Because I think that, a lot of my work is dealing with the result of the best that someone had not being good enough and causing a really bad problem. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, and so I don't like stories too much.
I love what you just said there. I even wrote it down. Stories pollute presence. My quintessential example of this is the phrase that has become all too common in the last 15 years or so. But he's a rescue. As though that is an excuse for any behavior. He reared up and bit me 3 times yesterday, but he's a rescue. Or I can't ever catch him out in the pasture and whatever, but he's a rescue. And
he's a rescue because of what someone did. But that he's a rescue because of what someone did or did not do for him or to him or her. You know what I'm saying? Like rescues are people's problems, not horses' problems. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so I think that a lot of my work as far as rehab now, and unfortunately a lot of rescues are rescues because of physical things that people, because as a result of things that people do to them and the physical repercussions therefrom. And I'm not saying that it's every thing, but there are some horses that the vet needs to be called out and they need to be put to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like, and
sure.
But I think also, and people may disagree with me, but that's okay. Like, I think that rescues have also become a kind of like the goodwill, like you just throw away what you wanted and don't want anymore. and you leave all of the memories of that part of your life to someone else. Unfortunately, with horses, you have another sentient being that has its own views of the world, some of whom were inherited from you, in general, you. And so, I think that we're not fixing horses when we're dealing with behavioral challenges or medical challenges. We're dealing with the people that did that to them,
Sure. Yep. I absolutely agree. I'm a real big proponent, and I don't want to get too deep into this because it could snowball into its own thing, but I think it's always important to keep in mind that horses have to have an economic value. And the more that you can do for a horse to add economic value to it, the more you're ensuring that it will be well cared for in a bad scenario. A divorce happens, whatever, we have to disperse horses. If you have that horse that has sentimental value but no actual economic value, and it comes down to a point where you can't care for it anymore, that's the one that's going to wind up in the unfortunate situation down the road. And I know people deal with horses because they love them, but I think the divorce of the idea of them being economic in nature and just emotional in nature, I think that ultimately harms a lot of horses.
I would agree. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are also just those horses that are so fucked up that they're not safe in other people's hands.
Sure.
And so I have made an agreement with myself and with my horses that I am their last home. And if by any stretch of the imagination, for any unfortunate and unforeseen circumstance, I'm not able to care for them anymore, I'm putting them to sleep, because they all have their quirks, and some of them can be very dangerous and challenging quirks. And unfortunately, there are fewer and fewer people who can deal with horses that require that, And so I've decided that if it ever comes to a situation like that for me, then I'm going to put my horses to sleep so they won't have to worry and I won't have to worry.
Okay. Well, that's a little morbid turn I didn't see coming, but all right.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's beyond sentimental value, right? Like, like all of my horses are back from pretty major medical and biomechanical dysfunctions where they have to be schooled in a certain way to keep them sound and healthy. Otherwise, they're going to fall apart. And as a result of everything that was done to them before they came. And there just aren't a lot of people that I know personally that have that skill set to take care of them.
Sure.
Yeah. And so for me, being a responsible horse person, loving them and knowing that the economic value that I could garner from them is very minimal because of the very specific needs that they have, which is why I got them. The best thing for me to do is not pass them off and hope that, they wouldn't end up in the situation, because all of their behaviors were from pain. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And they just require a certain situation. So that's all. I mean, and outside of emotion, that's just, I think that you looking at them from an economic value and me looking at them from the place that I live, it's all love. It's love for the horses and wanting the best for them. And, I just have this thing for horses that need a chance, and there aren't a lot of people who can give them the chance that they need. And I sometimes can. That comes with its costs also.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay, let's get a little more into we've got it. This is hitting home with me a little bit. My main demo horse is getting up there in age a little bit, to the point where he's lost a step or two, and my years with him are definitely gonna be limited going forward. So I don't want to think about that. All right. How about we'll get into dressage a little bit more? So you're a French school guy. Tell us from your perspective a little bit of differences in the schools and what being a French school guy means to you.
So I've kind of moved away from, and it's just been in this last few years that I had teachers in the French school, or a teacher in the French school, and I appreciate very much what it has to offer as far as lightness and all of that. But the end goal of all of the schools of dressage properly done is a light, collected, maneuverable horse. I'm learning more that, the more I stick to national ways of procuring art, the more there's just an inherent prejudice against the others. And now my work is leading me into more of just the anatomical aspects of dressage, and it's just a correctly moving horse no matter what the breed. And I think that that's kind of where I go, and it's been recently percolating in my brain off of just going over Immanuel Kant, his categorical imperative for a thing as a means to an end, as opposed to it being an end in and of itself. And I think that, when we have different schools of dressage, they require different types of horses, and the horses in that way are a means to an end. And I can't appreciate it as much as if I look at it from an anatomical basis, so where the work is for the horse and not the horse for the work. As a species, people are beyond needing horses really to do anything except for be a hobby most of the time. And so I think that those national comparisons and all of that stuff are kind of now quite silly. Just a personal opinion.
No, I get that. I guess I'm looking at it more from an organizational or a stereotypical, like what would you say would be some of the characteristics that define the French school versus the German school or the Spanish ways? And I'll just add this to it because we're coming at this a little backwards from our last conversation, but I really feel like a lot of the influence of those schools is because, we live in a world now that's a world. They lived in a feudal world. And so the German school, they had a pool of horses to draw from, and there weren't, planes, 747s carrying horses from other parts of the world to influence bloodlines and so forth. And they weren't swapping and trading out breedings with the French people, who had probably a more refined, more thoroughbred-esque type of a horse. And then you have the Spanish school that has a really thick-middled, heavy-necked type horse. And so how much of an influence do you think the various types of horses had on the school becoming that way? If I don't feel like I articulated that very well, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. I think that the French school has there was a big change when it wasn't just for royalty anymore. And I think that the French school went a very different way with the onset of a genius by the name of Francois Boucher. And I think he was the nephew of someone who used to take care of the horses at Versailles, and he couldn't afford the Baroque horses that could sit. And so when he was working, there was this onslaught and this influx of the more refined English thoroughbred, and he grafted a new idea of collection onto their rectangular bodies instead of their long rectangular bodies, instead of the short, squat, square bodies. And within Boucher's ideas, the flexions and the releasing of the body and the releasing of the tongue, and his ideas about submission and adjustability and total control as a way of balance, making sure that the horse, from his very, very pure Boucherist form, as I understand it, there's so much of the balance that is started at the halt and at the walk. So we don't start with impulsion with Boucher. We start with immobility for the most part, as to where with the French, with the German school, it's all about forward, 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 forward. You start with the hind end and you get the motor rolling, and eventually the contact will come and the shoulders become maneuverable. Boucher is like, before we add any impulsion, I want utter control of the horse's every step. And so I think that was, I think, as from a rehab point of view, I really enjoy Boucher because he allows for his ideas of flexion and the movement of the tongue and the jaw, the mobility of the jaw, the softness in the pole, when done correctly, has the ability to totally unlock the horse's fascia and change their whole neuromotor structure, as opposed to where the Germans come in. For me, it's really good for training. So Boucher, the French school through Boucher, which is the only part I'm really interested in, is really good for rehab work and helping horses who've lost their balance because of lameness or some an injury regain their balance. And the German school, when you don't have a horse that's messed up, is really good for starting training. And my goal is to always get my rehab horses into a space of training. And so in that way, as I understand it, I use them both depending upon the circumstance.
And just to clarify, it took me a little while, and I'm of French heritage. Most of us Americans call Boucher Boucher. So he's talking about the same guy there. If anybody gets a little confused, like the Boucher snaffle and those sorts of things. And interestingly about him, you didn't mention this, but I agree with you in that he was a genius, but he had a complete reversal throughout his lifetime. He wrote a series of
there were
books.
I think there were 12 or 14 editions. He grew, and where he started was not where he ended. And I think that is why I admire him also so much, is that he continued to grow and refine himself and bring his thoughts to fruition and teach. That's why I really appreciate him, because he was free. He was free. He didn't allow himself to be bound down by the traditions, which are always made up of inherent assumptions about a thing. He explored his questions, and I think that as a horseman and as a human, that's kind of the path that I walk.
Yeah. Don't allow the stories to pollute your presence. So
that's right.
He continued to listen to the horse and evolve throughout his career, and really completely basically said, all that stuff I did before I was 35, don't do that. That was not right. You listen to me now.
That was that was the best I had then. Mm-hmm. And now I'm better. If you want to explore that, you can, but this is you don't have to start where I started. And I think that that's the mark of a really great teacher, sure. That they don't make you begin where they begin. They allow you to begin where they are now. And I think that that's how it works. I think he had an incredibly uncanny gift for understanding connection with horses and how he was able to unlock them. I think that he had an incredible gift for patience, but I also think that it was important that his ideas didn't work with all horses, and he recognized that. Like if they didn't work, as is in his biography, like if they didn't work, if the horse wasn't changing, because there, like you said, there was an economic value. Like he was a circus performer and he needed horses to show up. And if they weren't coming along, he sent them along. It's fair.
I'm kind of always leery of some of those other clinicians that will tout that this will work with any horse and da da da. I'm sorry, but that's just not true. It might work with most horses, but you're always going to find these exceptions and the ones that are a little different. They exist,
and those are the horses I love.
Mm-hmm. They're usually the ones that teach you something. Yeah, they add another part to the puzzle that you weren't seeing before. Sometimes it's the exceptions that wind up defining the rule. And
they make you discover a very different part of yourself that you wouldn't have known was lost had they not come into your realm.
Very good. Yep. I'm sorry. I'm fighting this thing. Okay. Well, you also participated in the Journey On Summit last fall, and I know you and Josh Nickel went to that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience and how that was for you? And I think you've got a future commitment overseas with that as well, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. I think, last fall was the time of, at the best horse practices and at Warwick's deal, it was a time to share with people who had come to see all of us, but it was also really just an incredible time for me to meet some really, really beautifully minded professional people, other trainers. I swear, your presentation, that horse Mateo, that horse with the arthritis, like that idea of that I had never heard of, really, of lowering the bit enough for the horse to pick it up. Like that is what changed that horse's mind about whether he was able to walk on that leg again or not. It totally just changed his mind. As soon as he had to be responsible for himself, he was responsible for himself. And he moved in a way that allowed him to be responsible for himself. And so, in Texas, it was crazy because I had met a whole bunch of people whose work I've been reading since I was a kid. And it was really, really interesting and wonderful and more on a personal level than a professional level. Like, I'm just super grateful that I've been able to meet people and create friendships with folks that are kind of on the same wavelength as I am,
Mm-hmm.
Like who care enough for horses to not stay small when they would much rather stay small.
Sure.
And teach. And so I think that was I think out of all of it, like that was the most inspiring thing for me.
See, I kind of, what you were saying earlier about your horses and there being so few people of that mindset and all, I feel like we're in a renaissance right now.
I agree.
Yeah,
I just don't know that there would be. I think that we are in a renaissance right now. I could not agree more. And if it came along, and I think that you understand that sometimes life works where the right folks come along when they're needed. Like I would definitely, because that's how all of my horses ended up with me. Like I was the right person when they needed them. And if that happens, then great. But if not, then, they're still my responsibility. And either way, I'm responsible for them,
Yeah. So, no, I'm just pointing out, like, I don't feel like we're in a dwindling. I think we're very much in an expansive.
Yeah. Indeed.
In fact, I almost feel like it sucks. I waited a long time before I started teaching people because I felt a responsibility like I needed to be at a certain level I was before it was morally right for me to teach. I guess if that makes sense. And I waited a long
Yeah.
time. And now I look out there, and at that point, I don't think there were that many good clinicians. Now I'm going out to these things, and I'm like, shit, all these kids that are 10 years younger than me, they've all really got something to offer. Like, how the hell am I going to set myself apart in this market? Because now there's a ton of good people out there, and that wasn't true 20 years ago. But man, now there's lots of that works out well for the customers.
Well, and I think that, but I also think that it's super important because I also think that it's super important that just because you waited, just because you honored yourself, because there also are a lot of people who need to take more time. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are a lot of people out there who need to take more time. Like, and so, you know, I mean, and it's like with me, like, I mean, I didn't set out to train people when I came back. Like, people asked me to help them. I didn't set myself up as a trainer as a goal in life. That was not my road. I had a totally different life. But I also understand that there's a way of seeing that I have that helps horses that otherwise wouldn't be possible to be a little bit more possible, you know? And I'm learning to communicate well with people. You know? I also think that, like I said, it's not just other clinicians as competition per se via the market and what we have to offer customers or clients. I think that what is the really important thing for me is what us as teachers have to offer each other. Like, that's also a really important thing for me. And like I said, like, it was your idea in that presentation around the bit and just that time that you spent up there. Like, there have been substantial changes in my practice that, like I said, have made really wonderful things possible for horses that it would have taken me a long time to fix.
Well,
by just trusting them. No, I'm not. I'm really, like I'm saying, like, Mateo found his back because he had to hold the bit. I had not read that. Like, that's not something they teach us in dressage here, in the United States. And so I think that it's really important that you also understand, just from a personal space, like, how much I appreciate your work.
Well, thank you.
How like when I do this, like, I can say, like, I learned this from this dude. Like, I learned this from Daniel. This moment right here has been the key to help me find the missing piece to the rest of the puzzle that I've put together, and I think that that's also a part of what's happening here, is that there's this wonderful cross-pollination happening that moves beyond just the awfulness that the horse world can be. I think that's also the part of the Renaissance, is that people are understanding that, like, we are greater service to more people when we are available to each other, and so that's a personal thank you from me to you.
Well, thank you. You're being very gracious. And I have to agree with you. Like, that the Best Horse Practices Summit was the first event like that I've ever been to, where all of the clinicians genuinely got along and appreciated one another, and there wasn't, sometimes there's that sabotaging nature. The next guy up sits there and tells you exactly why the guy before him was wrong, and there's some bullshit that goes on sometimes that I've never have appreciated. And that event and all of the people at it were absolutely not that way. Everybody was open and gracious and building on, and that's, I think a lot of,
and honest enough to feel safe enough to be honest, which was really, really important. Um, and I think that for me, what has also grown out of that is the ability to choose to build friendships out of that space with the folks that were there, and I think that and like I said, that's the thing that I'm really grateful for,
absolutely.
really grateful for.
Well, I'm glad that I met you. I gotta say that you needed a ride, and I showed up right there, just
yeah,
perfect time.
It was awesome. I didn't know how I was gonna get there.
So we got put in the right place at the right time, and we got to meet and everything, and I'm glad we did. So
indeed.
Well, Nahshon, it is now time for our sponsors of the episode, and for the first time, we've got two. So our co-sponsors, we have Colorado State University is putting on a bake sale. They would like you to come get as high as the mountains. Colorado State is committed to promoting agriculture and following laws, and thankfully you can do both in Colorado and still get baked. Get a steer that you're fattening up for the freezer. Try our new hash cookies that last month, a finishing freezer camp. Your steaks will have never been higher, and the cows are so damn mellow, man. Nahshon's from Colorado. So for those, I might not have mentioned that earlier. Okay, also, this is one I wrote a long time ago, and I don't know why it appealed to me. For you, Nahshon, but it did. So I've had this one in my pocket. But we are also being sponsored by Dalton's Urinal Cakes and BioHealthy Sanitation Supply House. Dalton's is committed to upholding the highest standards in commercial bathroom sanitation. We're the only eco-friendly sanitation company ever selected to handle the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo at full capacity on the morning after Taco Tuesday. Our hemp tissue napkins are like wiping with a biorenewable cloud, and our hand wash stations will clean you like a Rocky Mountain stream. While we don't recommend it, our biodegradable urinal cakes are made safe enough that you could eat the big white mint and go have fresh breath for days. Dalton's Urinal Cakes and BioHealth Sanitation Supply House. So thank you to our
so I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
That originally came to me from Roadhouse, the movie Roadhouse. That they had that. I don't know if you've seen that, but Dalton was the name of one of the characters, and he was a bouncer at a bar that was a scummy bar, and he says, "This place is so low, they have a sign in the men's room that says, 'Don't eat the big white mint.'" That's where that one came from. Anyway.
That was clever.
All right. Well, I got a couple of nerdy dressage questions for you. So we'll get out of the
I might have some answers.
Well, these are just opinions. So and I know we've talked about this before, but this will just be on the record. So do you find much of a difference between training stallions and mares? And what I mean there specifically is, like in the Spanish school, there are certain maneuvers that are not taught to mares, like the airs above the ground and those sorts of things, the levad and all, because they believe that the center of gravity is different in a mare than it is in a stallion.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that was what they believed. I think that I love mares. Because mares require you to be polite. Stallions usually are looking to be told what to do, that I found, and mares are looking to be listened to. and I just jive with mares a whole lot better. But no, I've seen mares do the levad.
Yeah, I don't agree.
But
with
I
that.
just think, I don't. I think that that's the thing. I think that that's the silliness of tradition. I think that, I think that tradition is more addicted to identity than it is to technique and results. Because I don't think that that's true. I've seen some extraordinary mares. and some shitty stallions.
Sure. One of the other things about that, like we talked about the difference of breeds and stuff, we don't know what horses looked like 300 years ago. And it may well have been that at that point there was more of a difference physiologically between a stallion and a mare than what we see today. I don't know why, but like I know,
Well,
if you look at some of the old bits, horses definitely had narrower mouths 100, 200 years ago than they have today. So there are definitely some physiological changes that are taking place throughout time.
but the boys came from the girls. You know, the stallions came from their mamas.
Sure.
They're not that far apart.
No, well, I mean, it does, like,
you know.
well, so I'll say this, like in humans, have you ever seen the deal where if a woman stands arm length away from a wall, you put a chair down with the back against the wall, a woman can put her forehead on the wall, pick the chair up, and stand up. A man cannot do that. There is.
So if you put a chair halfway, if you do what?
You take a chair and you put its back against the wall, and then you put your hand up against the wall to measure arm length. You're standing arm length back. You lean forward and put your forehead on the wall. Reach down, pick the chair up, and stand up. A woman can do that, and a man cannot. And I've tried this with a lot of different people. There is something physiologically different between us that allows a woman to, and it doesn't, like a man watching that goes, oh, hell, I can do that. Try it. You can't.
I'm going to give it a shot, but I think like athletically though, like I think that when it comes to discipline specific work, I don't see much of a difference between. Now, I didn't live 300 years ago. You know, I mean, shit, 300 years ago, the world was a different story for people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so but I think it's when it comes to performance work, I think that and it's kind of like, and that's kind of like people who only will, they will only work with mares. And I love mares, but I will not discriminate if another good horse, a stallion or a gelding comes into my realm, you know? I don't know. I don't deal with narrow particulars like that. Yeah, I'm more of an individual, like, show me what you got.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm the same way. I've ridden pissy geldings and mares that were very stoic, and you could never tell when they cycled or anything like that. And it's always just, what is this individual like? Because what the group is like.
And do I jive with them? Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about the importance of in-hand work? So dressage has a very long tradition of in-hand work. Where does that fit in with you? Obviously, you're talking about boucher and starting at the halt. So that's in-hand work. That's not being ridden.
Yeah, well, you can start at the halt. You can do it ridden. I think that in-hand work is really, it can be super helpful for some horses, and for some horses, it's not so helpful. And I think that this is, again, where I think this is where it is super important to look at the individual. Some horses can't handle it. And for the people who would say that all classical dressage institutions teach the piaffe and passage in hand, that's true. But Podolsky, in his book, My Horses, My Teachers, talked about one of the Lipizzaner stallions who the in-hand work to teach piaffe was just overwhelming. And he said that was the only horse at the school that he had ever taught the piaffe to under saddle. You know, so I think that the in-hand work is super necessary for some horses. But I don't think that my blanket statement for everybody is that everybody's an individual, and I need to have as wide a skill set as possible to meet all of them in the way that they need me and are asking me to help them.
So I'll just say, for my part, I personally feel like when I'm on a horse, I have physical contact with both sides of the horse and all of my aids available to me. And I feel like I can communicate better. I can keep them from getting frustrated, and I can move along faster in a better mindset. I can do things better from the saddle than I can from the ground, I guess. And maybe that's just my skill set's weak on the ground and stronger in the saddle. Maybe not, but that's always been my feeling. If I'm doing a lot of groundwork, I may need to do that for certain individuals, but I feel like I can get it all done better from the saddle myself.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that too, people's physical capabilities also come into play here because, unless you're a really tall person, it's going to be really, and you have a, and you, it's going to be really hard to be really effective at in hand work, with big horses. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I think there's also these practical matters where, for a horse and rider, if you have a big horse and a small rider, the size variability between between the two of them, it doesn't make it practical or safe. On that end, I've had tremendous fun with in-hand work. I think it's a really wonderful school of dressage to explore. I mean, and me personally, I've trained horses to do tempi changes on the long lines and off and the levade and Spanish walk. So it's super fun. It's a super fun skill set. But like I said, like some horses can't handle that pressure. That and that intense pressure of the only point of contact being with their person being their head, which kind of speaks to you. Like my thoroughbred mare Mohawk, she can't handle she's a seat horse. Too much pressure up front, she just explodes. She can't do it. And I'm not gonna say, because some influencers that say that all horses need to do this. It's not possible for all horses. Like everybody needs to eat, but some people are vegetarian. You know what I'm, you know what I'm saying? Like that's
Okay.
like if I eat meat, I'm gonna be sick. But I gotta eat.
Sure.
Same deal.
The other thing I wanted to talk with you about here on the more technical side was the double bridle. And again, I know we've had this conversation before, but just for getting it on the record. So one of the things that I see sometimes that has always mystified me a little bit about some of the dressage trainers is they'll be on a horse doing fairly high level maneuvers with the double bridle and yet talking about how green the horse is. And maybe that's just a question of what I consider green versus what they consider green. But to me, the double bridle is for more advanced horses. You're 3/4 of the way through your training at that point. I know you were talking about another trainer that of the old school that didn't believe that at all. They put the double bridle on pretty early. And I guess just because you have it on doesn't mean you have to use all of it, right? So I certainly understand that. But
well, yeah, I think that for me, a lot of it again is dependent on the horse. Boudant, in his book, I don't remember. It's dressage for the high school and outdoors. In it, he talks about how, for him, he considers the finished horse one that can go in the snaffle with no noseband and X, Y, and Z and all of this. But he in that book, he advocated for some horses to be started early. Oliveira talks about how some horses will need to be started early in the double bridle and how others will be able to be schooled to the high school with a snaffle bit. I think it's super variable. I think that it's important, though, that people understand that, well, for me, the purpose is to continue to keep the horse's jaw relaxed and the tongue mobile. And some horses, because of their temperament, they need so like there's like a lot of my curbs on the double bridle have sliding cheeks, so the horse can move their tongue up and down and kind of use it like a cricket, and I've matured in my practice now to where, primary, the snaffle is my primary and the curb is the secondary that just keeps the horse's tongue moving and the jaw relax, but the signals come from the snaffle, I mean, and so there's all of there's I think that as we train and as we go through our process of training, it becomes less and less about what we can get horses to do and more about how we can get them to do it, and that's where that's where the um the refinement of the technique comes to fruition, right? And that's why I was saying, like, there are some people who are good, who are teaching, who may need more time, just so that they understand more completely what they're talking about,
Absolutely.
and it's just an observation. It's not a judgment. And the thing is that, and it's understanding too that, like, I consider a green horse a horse that is not super well versed in the art of training. I think that there are a lot of young horses that are schooled too quickly that are not green. you know
Yeah.
they're able to do the movements, and just because they can doesn't mean they should be doing them. Their bodies aren't ready.
I do. I'm certainly more of a riding young horses school than you are, but I would certainly agree that riding a young horse puts a responsibility on you to be protective of that horse's body. I think,
and mind.
Yeah, yes, but to me the mind's easier than the body. But they're like, especially the really talented horses, those are the ones where you have to be consciously dialing them back, because they're always wanting to do more than what they really should be doing. Yeah. So
yeah,
I am a young horse guy, but I certainly, that does not mean that I think that young horses should, or whatever, do everything. I think you definitely still have to be protective of them. I do also think, as I've worked with a lot of different breeds, I find more of those old school horses, the Lusitanos and those horses, they are much slower mentally maturing. So again, that deal of the type of horse influencing the type of training, I think that, as I ride those horses, I definitely find that their 4, 5, 6-year-old year is the same kind of mental attitude that we have quarter horses in their 2 and 3-year-old year.
And they're 2 and 3. Yeah. There's a book that I have by a man who by the last name of de Eisenberg, and it was written in the 18th century. And he goes and he talks about thoroughbreds and how thoroughbreds aren't at their best and shouldn't be worked really, really hard until they're about 7 or 8 years old. Going back to that mental and physical maturity. And he also says that they don't do well in dealing with people who are not fair. And so, I think that we have to, it's really important for trainers to really be very clear on where they're at about people's expectations and their ambitions on young horses, because I think that that's where the responsibility as a trainer lay. If that's where you are with young horses, is that, and they're really talented, like, you have to protect the horses from ambition. And unfortunately, you do that, and there aren't a lot of people. Well, there aren't some people. That's not fair to say. I'll just say that there are people who will take their horses away and take them to someone who will push the animal more. And so I think that that's kind of where the ethics of it comes in for me. Like, it's very clear, like, horses, the work is for the horses, even if the horse was bred for the work.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad you brought that up. And this might be, like, you got into some of the ethics and the morality of it. this may be something you're totally unfamiliar with, and maybe I wind up editing this out, but it's been one of my soapboxes. In the reining world, we have got a stallion that was a very high performing stallion, and as a breeding stallion, he's the 800-pound gorilla. He has produced tons of other stallions that won lots of money, tons of mares. So on the performance scale, he is as high up as you can go. The problem is that he carries a deafness gene. He himself was deaf. A significant number of his progeny are deaf, and his grand progeny are deaf. I can say that in the quarter horse world 30 years ago, there's no way that horse would have been a stallion. Absolutely. He probably couldn't have gotten papers. And now he's the 800-pound gorilla of an entire industry that's I think the third largest money-wise within the entire horse market. So where do you think we are in terms of morality? Because I kind of find, just as we're talking about this new young bunch of clinicians, and they're collaborating together, and some of the backstabbing has stopped, and we're in a renaissance. Yet at the same time, in some of the industries, they have actually progressed into things that I consider less moral than they were 30 years ago.
I think that when it comes to stuff like that, how is the horse's life inhibited or not in any way? Like, what is its quality of life? I think that when we do that, and we knowingly do that, it's really important to understand that if we participate in breeding something like that, that we're willing to provide the care that it needs, I mean, because on that point, like, there are dressage horses who are so hot that, and they breed them to be so reactive that they actually put cotton balls in their ears while they're performing, so they don't hear as much, And so for me, it's quality of life. And for me, it is also making sure, because also I'm not a competition rider anymore, but like, you're breeding horses that are better, that there aren't many people that are good enough to ride them,
Yep.
And so I think I mean, and not judging it, but just understanding, like, this is a reason why the quality of life of so many horses is so poor, is because they're just not able to get everything that their breeding it requires from people.
I completely agree. And on the deaf horse thing, the trainers are preferring those horses. They find them more trainable because they're not distracted.
Oh yeah, because they don't have opinions. So I think that's kind of where I would look at it and say, like, you're building how can I say this? That, like, are you really training if you're depending on a deficiency?
Yep. I feel the same way about sedating horses and things like that. If we have to do those sorts of things, I'm not going to do those sorts of things.
If you knowingly continue to take them away from themselves, like, are you training? Like, that's the horse as a means to an end. And for me, other people can do that, but for me, I don't participate there. I don't participate there. And I leave other people to decide what they need to do and how they need to do it. And I just hope that all I can do is just say that I hope that the horse is taken care of beyond in all of the ways that they need to be taken care of, because I don't know, just in myself, like, I don't know if that's completely training a horse if you're dependent and preferring a handicap to get what you want.
Yeah, I agree with you. To me, is a big part of maintaining their mind and emotional state is in those instances where we allow them to just be a horse and kick them out in a pasture with a bunch of other horses. And hey, I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You just
in a way, you're
right
rendering them helpless. Yeah, you're rendering them helpless. Yeah. You know, I mean, like if you're depending on that to do what you need to do, then, you know, you have ceased to have the horse in your life as a horse, and you have begun to have them as a product that is to completely be capitalized upon. And if that's the choice that some people make, and they can make it without needing to feel like they have to protect themselves from just that truth, then good for them. You know, I just choose not to participate in that way. I don't have to.
Well, that's very if I say benevolent, it's going to sound like I'm mocking you, and I'm not. But I applaud your "you do you, I'll do me" attitude. That's very
well,
good.
I mean, and I mean, and the thing is, because it's like, what am I? You know, the best way that I'm gonna help people see horses like I see them is to just do the work that I do. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that like it's how people are choosing to allow themselves to participate in the process of horses being in their lives. And this is where, from a purely individual space, like I can't say I'm going to breed a horse to be deaf so that he's easier to train so I can make a shit ton of money on him. To me, that's cheating. That's not fair competition, you know?
Oh,
and
yeah.
like you're I mean, really, like, and you're not really showing a skill if you're dependent upon a handicap. You're just not.
I couldn't agree more.
And I mean, and just from an observational, non-judgmental place, like that's not horse training, that's puppetry.
Yep. Do you want a partner that is a sentient being, or do you want a robot?
Or do you want a slave?
Yeah, there you go. A perfect word. That's exactly,
you know, I mean, because the thing is that because the thing is that like that horse is totally dependent on you to make every decision that's right for him or her. And like there are things that if, you know, they have the pleasure of actually going out on the trail or going outside or doing something like that, like if there's danger that presents itself that they need to run from and they can't hear it, then like you've endangered them and yourself. Like you can't trust them with your life either.
Sure. Yep.
You know, so it's moving beyond, you know, like that like breeding the horse to be deaf, like that horse has become a fetish, you know?
Well, yeah.
In the purest sense, right? Like it's now a fetish.
Man, Nahshon, having a conversation with you takes some turns. Let me tell you. I will absolutely. I don't know if it's come out yet. I don't think it has. But the Best Horse Practices Summit, if you go to their website, I'll link it in the deal. They're going to have all of our presentations where you can rent and watch just that. I'll definitely tell y'all, go find Nahshon's, and there'll be a moment halfway through where he says riding your horse should be sexy, and is
to make you feel sexy. That's right.
it was one of those. The whole room laughed in unison, and you just had that warm feeling of it was a great moment. Y'all definitely need to go watch that presentation when they become available, which should be soon, I think. I had another question for you on the technical aspects, and it was on the timing of aids and uses in training of the half halt as you see it. So what are your thoughts? I know that half halt can be one of those controversial kind of things. Some people find it mystifying. Some people find it very simple. I don't understand those that find it mystifying, but tell us your thoughts.
I think a half halt is really just the maintaining of balance. And I think that there are many different ways. There are many different ways to half halt depending on what you're wanting to do. But I think that the application of the half halt, just because I'm a nerd, and there will be some folks who just don't do it this way, but I think that it's really
fun.
Can
I stop you for just a second?
Yeah.
Would you mind, since you're a nerd, just for make sure everybody's on the same page, before you start what you're about to say, would you define for us what a half halt is, and then continue?
Yeah, so it's just what it says. Like it's an incomplete halt. It's telling the horse to prepare to prepare by asking it to lighten up on the front and flex in its hind legs and to soften in the bridle. I think that's the super most generic term. It's a pretty self-explanatory word in my brain. And so it's kind of like a comma in the middle of a sentence. As you know, a half halt is a comma, a halt is a period.
So it's kind of tapping the brake pedal. You're checking them up a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's the middle of a sentence and not the end of a sentence. It's a comma.
So what would you do in terms of cueing it? I think that's what she meant by timing of the aids. And then what places would you find that an applicable thing to throw in? Where do you need a comma? What would be some examples?
So transitions, so like I think I use the half halt often before a transition to let the horse know that we're about to change balance and we're about to change gait and rhythm. I use it to ask the horse to pay attention, or to not lose awareness of me if he or she has lost awareness. And I think that because I try to train my horses to always wait for the halt. Like they should always be prepared to slow down if I ask them to. I think that since I train them to do that, that the half halt is just like, hey, something new is coming. Something new is coming. And if there's nothing new coming and they're imbalanced, then I just leave them alone and let them go on their way. So is that clear, Daniel?
It is to me. I don't know if it's clear to the rest of the world.
Okay, that's the best I got.
Well, I was just going to ask you there again. There was a thing you said there that I really liked, and it was about preparing for a transition, even an upward transition. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I like to think of transitions as departures. I think that's a better way to think about it than a transition. You're not going from a walk to a lope. You are departing into a lope, and it to me, I find that makes it more clear for a lot of people. And to me, also I wasn't sure about the timing of the aids part of the question. To me, in your seat.
Oh, I didn't answer it yet.
Okay, well then I'll shut up and let you go to that part of it. But anyway, I like that thought of, instead of thinking of them as transitions, think of them as departures. To me, that adds another element to it that makes it a little more helpful. Anyway,
to help people find the feel of the movement of the different gaits, I try to use a metaphor of our natural way of going, right? So like the walk, when we have a healthy walk on the ground, like it's the same rhythm as if we're riding a horse, and our pelvis will go like forward, back, side to side, and up and down. in that movement, and their trot or the jog is like us jogging, and like the lope or the canter is like a skip in how I use the seat and allow the pelvis to follow the horse's hind legs. What's really important to me in half halts, just because I like to pay attention like this, is to give the aids in time with the feet that are with the horse's feet that are on the floor. So like say riding two-handed, when I'm starting to teach a horse lead changes, like if they're cantering on the right lead, I will, when I'm asking them to change, I'll close my right hand when the right front foot is on the ground, and that's the half halt, telling the horse we're transitioning from a right lead, and now we're going to switch diagonals in the canter to the left lead. And so that's kind of how I use it. I half halt with my legs and with stirrup pressure. So like if I let my heels down a little bit more, it frees the horse's shoulder up and they take longer strides. If I put a little bit more pressure in the balls of my feet, then the horse's shoulder, their scapula are a little bit more constricted and they start to collect. You can, on Iberian horses particularly, I have found that like you can half halt with your feet. Like you can scrunch your feet up in your boots and it closes your hip flexors and kind of flexes your groin muscle, and they slow down. And so for horses that have a really hard time taking contact with the hand, that's a really good way in helping them understand how to meet the half halt without feeling like it's coming from a taking of space in front. And that's more of a psychological aid. There's a whole bunch of different ways. For the levad, from Piaffe, I half halt Nova with my chest, and I'll push my stomach out and then I'll lift my chest up and boop, he comes right up. So there's all of these different ways that I work with it, you know? It's a vocabulary. The half halt, the half halt is like I said, it's a comma instead of a period. We're piaffing, like comma. Now we're gonna levad, comma. Now we're gonna piaffe, period. Good boy.
Well, that was well said. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was very well said.
Awesome. Thanks.
Well, I think the last part of this, I saved this for last, and I feel like you and I were involved in a conversation that didn't end at one point, and it was on diversity in the industry. And
yeah, sure. I'm thankful for bringing that up.
I don't know if you, okay, well,
let's do it. Let's
if you don't want to tackle this,
let's do it.
And I'm a little conflicted on exactly how to answer this, because the real answer that I have contains personal information about public people that I don't know that I have permission to say.
So maybe that's not the best answer to give.
Yeah, but it would be the real answer. Like we were kind of questioning that deal. There were 8 of us that were there as presenters on how to make things more diverse. And I'm thinking, I mean, if you actually know the stories of the 8 people standing up here, I mean, we had a couple of interracial marriages. We had, for those that don't know, Nahshon is a black guy. I'm married to a redhead woman. I keep bringing that up. They're 2% of the population, right? We have 2 adoptive families. We had 2 people there that weren't Americans. We had different sexual orientations represented. We had people that have graduated high school. We had people with PhDs. It all depends on how you cut the pie up, but we were about as damn diverse a group as you possibly could imagine if you actually know all of the people up there as individuals. There were more women than men on the panel. You know, it all depends to me on how we slice up the pie. I of course, my prism of perspective on this is as a conservative white guy, so people probably don't want to hear what I have to say on the subject of diversity.
I think that for this to be a fair part of the conversation that maybe we should just talk to each other without worrying about what everybody else wants to think about. And I'm telling you this because I'm going to answer your question from a place of friendship.
Sure.
And what everybody else thinks the answer should be is not going to be what predicates the answer that I give you. Okay? So I think that to have a fair discussion about this, it's important to not go in with anybody else's assumed or not expectations about how this should be, because how it should be addressed. Because I think that you're right. It was super diverse in a lot of ways, but I didn't really know that until that question came up, because there were some folks that didn't feel safe for whatever reason to say, hey, like, yeah, we are an adoptive family and we're white parents with black children. And like, and there were also other people who were like, hey, like, yeah, I really want to do outreach and work with black people, black inner city youth, but I don't want to feel like I'm patronizing them, and I don't want to feel like I am using them in certain ways to get certain attention. And so I think that we have this lens of what others are going to think about how we feel, and I'm going to be courageous and just not give a fuck and answer you as honestly as I can. How's that?
Well, absolutely. I kind of felt like,
okay.
Yeah, like when I met you, we were at the hotel in the breakfast room there, and I sat down at the table with you, and this is sort of my way of dealing with people, I guess, is I gave you a little shit test. So I have no idea how you're going to be, whether you're uber sensitive or a good sense of humor or whatever. And I basically, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I kind of poked you a little bit. And you verbally poked me right back. And I was like, okay, we're going to be friends. This is going to be cool. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah. And I think, and I am super sensitive, but I also have a sense of humor. You know, I think that my goal is to be as complete a human being as I possibly can. And that really means working on the weak spaces and trying to make them stronger. By design, I'm an incredibly sensitive person. I'm super private. You know, I am self-aware more times than not, because when I get afraid, I stutter horribly. And sometimes I just get so overtaken by energy that it just feels like I'm swept away, and things just come flooding out, you know, of my mouth. And so like I'm all of these things, and I said yes because I think that being a healthy human being means not being too stuck in the way you were, so that you can figure more parts of who you are out.
Well,
that's why you and I met.
Yeah.
For me, you know.
And if again, this is all editable. If I go somewhere here that you don't want to go, then that's fine. But I know this about you because of a private conversation that we had. You were almost hesitant in accepting the invitation to go to this because you were scared you were invited because you were the black guy and they needed a black guy, and not because you're a good qualified trainer who has the knowledge base and skill base to deserve to be there. And that's really the part of this diversity.
There've been and you don't know until you show up. You know, you don't know until you show up. You know, I mean, because there have been situations, and I've grown up in situations like that, where it has been that. Am I a brilliant horseman? I think so. And some other people think so too. Um, and it turned out that people were super interested in what I had to offer. And you just don't know. You just don't know, you know? Um, because the fact of the matter is that I think as far, and in all fairness, in accepting the invitation, I also had to say that, maybe they're making a real concerted effort to try and find people of color who are on kind of the same wavelength, to let other people who may not feel safe to come as a participant to come and see that, look, we are making the effort to find people, and there are people. And sometimes you feel more welcomed when you know that there are folks there that look like you, even if they don't necessarily share your experiences. And I think that for me, this is where I had to make that choice, a personal choice, to grow, because I do know that a Black person is going to matter to Black children, seeing that image of me there, in ways that people who aren't Black will not understand. And I think that that's the role, that's part of my work, is saying that, like, it's possible. Because before me, before me actually making it, like, in this round, before participating in this round, I didn't know it was possible because I hadn't seen it done. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like college, like, it's easier for some folks to go because it's a family tradition to go to college. But if, like, you've never had anybody who can walk you through what college is supposed to be like, there's a huge learning curve on top of on top of the actual classroom experience. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, it has a lot to do with just people knowing that they're invited to, that they're invited into a space. And sometimes opening the door is not enough. Sometimes you've got to let them know that they're welcome in.
Yeah. I'm in South Louisiana, and a lot of people may not understand the culture here, but
yeah,
like, we have the Creole culture, and that's basically a mixed race culture. And they're not looked down upon or anything. I mean, they are as much a part. We go to Mardi Gras and stuff. We just had Mardi Gras finish up here. I mean, they're in the same parades. There isn't, racism just isn't really a thing down here, I guess. It may be quite contrary to what people expect, but we all eat together with, like, there aren't, I don't know. I've never really seen the barriers of where these people would have felt not invited or anything like that. And I can't say I've come into that within my experience of the horse industry. I have seen some people. I'll say this: I've seen more of this between women and men than on racial lines, and I guess that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of different ways to slice the pie as to what group we're talking about being included or not. But I have seen women in training positions and apprenticeships and so forth that every problem they had, they ascribed to because I'm a woman. And I'm sitting there watching the same thing going, no, they cut you a lot of slack because you're a woman. The reality is you're just not good enough yet, and you haven't admitted that to yourself, and so you're never going to solve the problem because everything you put off to because I'm a woman. If that had been me that had done that to that bay horse last week like you did, I'd have been fired on the spot. They gave you another chance because you're a woman. And again, that doesn't go to every group.
I can't really speak to hypotheticals. I think that I was given opportunity. I was there at the Best Horse Practices Summit, because I was given opportunity as a kid in a nonprofit organization to be around horses that I wouldn't have had access to any other way. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And it was really focused on that. And it just happened that I had a gift with horses that I never would have found out if this place didn't exist in the middle of the city. And I look at all of the ways like my life would be very different. Like I wouldn't be talking to you, you know? And so I don't think that standards should be different. But I do think that access should be equitable. You know, I think that, you know, there's still a lot of there's a lot of racism here in Colorado in some parts, you know, and it's just the way it's just the way that it is. But it's only that way because people are giving permission for it to be that way. And I think where I'm hearing you is that the culture down where you're at is such that different people are you know, aren't afraid to be in relationship with each other, which for me is what it's all about. You know?
Sure.
Like things don't change for the better as long as people are afraid of each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I'm all about equality of opportunity. Like you were saying, I mean, part of my story, my parents didn't have horses. I wasn't given riding lessons and stuff as a kid. I happened to have a friend who had horses and got invited to ride a time or two. They weren't high level horses. There weren't trainers involved. It was just some pasture horses, you know?
Yeah, they were just pasture horses. Yeah.
And I fell in love with it to a degree that is unusual. And when I turned 15, I had a part-time job and I made money and I went and bought a horse without my parents knowing that I bought a horse. I don't feel like the road was any easier for me because I'm a white guy. I feel like the only reason I made it down the road was because I had an unusual obsession and nothing was going to get in my way. But
right. And and it sounds like, and I think from the horse practices, that's a lot of people's story, right? Like I think it's Amy Skinner's story. And I think it's a lot of people's story. I think though that representation, race doesn't predicate, or ethnicity doesn't always predicate culture, right? Like I think culture is really, really important. And like, as long as you agree to be a part of a culture, you can look any way you want, as long as that culture will accept you. And I think that part of this renaissance that's happening is a shift in culture, because it was there were people who were there with interracial marriages, and there were people who had adopted different kids from different racial groups, but none of those, but they were mostly all white folks for the most part. And so this is where the representation part as culture, how it looks, is very homogenous. You know what I'm saying? And so how then do people feel safe enough to show up? And I think that's maybe where the conversation goes. And I don't have the answer for that because I'm not other people. I do know that my skill set apparently is good enough to allow me to be one of these presenters, and hopefully that will open up the space for folks to feel welcome, to where they'll come and participate, and young people or not so young people will maybe change their pedagogy and be able to show up too. Because I think that, Black equestrianism, exists like in two subsets, really. Like, for the most part, it's either like hunter jumpers or the Bill Pickett rodeo. It's like, and there's not much in between, and so it's like, how do we allow conversations like this to where folks don't have to worry about being judged, and folks don't have to worry about being right, but can come with their experiences in hopes of a healthy way forward, how do we make that happen more? And I think that this conversation and this interview is super good, right? Because you will not believe how many people are like, what you have to offer is super important. And I'm really happy to see that what was being offered was coming from a Black person. Like, I've had that said to me.
Sure.
Well, I mean, and I don't really know what that means. I don't know what to do with that. You know what I'm saying?
I'm with you. Yeah.
I mean, and it's not for me to judge, but it is saying that there is a need for people for more. There's a need in the community for some members of the community for the community to expand.
Sure. Let me ask you this. Like, it's kind of like the stallions and mares thing to me. I'm always trying to just take you on what are you as an individual, and to me that's the least prejudicial way of approaching it. I'm not going to stereotype you on that visual. I'm going to wait and meet you and then see what you could be. A great Black guy, you could be a son of a bitch. I don't know the answer to that until we have a conversation and we
and that's the key. That's the key right there, that you're not afraid to be curious. And you have this incredible gift for connecting with people, and that's not a gift, Daniel, that I have. Until somebody engages with me, everybody's suspicious. Like, that's just how I
man,
you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so here's, and I'm not accusing you of anything here. I'm telling you this is an area you're blind in. How many people roughly at the Best Horse Practices Summit told you they loved you throughout the course of that weekend?
Indeed, but did you notice that I was sitting in the same corner the whole time? I'm back by myself, and people came back to me because I just watch things, right? Like, sure. I'm available when I feel safe, and it takes me time to feel safe. I looked at you and how you were able to just engage with people, and like that's where I think I love people in being able to see places that someone is strong that I can improve in and find that part of myself that's missing. And I'm just saying that for some folks, me included, it takes great courage to move beyond the stories that we've inherited.
Well,
because that's the culture, right? The culture is what we've inherited, and like what we pass on is determined by how we choose to interact with each other.
So I would add one thing to that. What we pass on is determined by what we choose to hold on to from the past.
Indeed, right. How we choose to interact with each other. And it's like, if people are afraid of each other because of the stories that we've inherited, that's like the rescue horse, like you were saying. Like, some behaviors just aren't applicable from some of the past behaviors just aren't applicable to the present. And I think that, we're in a growing up space, but like, it's still a really scary world, I mean, and like I think I told you, like, I felt super safe driving around with you in Kentucky because you're white. Like, that was a safe thing for me. Still, Black folks are getting shot down for no reason. I mean, and so there's all of this stuff. And this, you asked me if I could have a superpower, what would it be? And I said something to the effect of not needing to, or being able to unlearn how to be afraid. And this is what I'm talking about. Because this whole conversation is built out of, somewhere down the line, one group of people's distrust in another. And now we have individuals like you and myself who are given the opportunity to confront this in a very real and safe and mutually beneficial way, you know? And that's something that takes a concerted effort to create.
Well, let me ask you this. Like there seem to be two schools of thought here. Like you have Morgan Freeman, the voice of God, who says the best way to deal with this is to stop acknowledging race altogether. I'm going to stop calling you a black guy and you stop calling me a white guy, and you're just a guy and I'm just a guy. And we just ignore that there's a difference. And I can certainly see some wisdom in that. I think we acknowledge it too damn much, and it's not the important part. It's kind of what I was talking about with the you cut us up as men versus women, or married versus not married, or up on stage with us we had a Mormon, a Catholic, a Jew, an atheist, and a Buddhist. I mean, like there's a lot of different ways to slice that pie up. I like the humor aspect of it, and that's why I kind of, when I broke the ice with you, I know what I said was something me trying to be funny about. And I keep talking the Blazing Saddles. If the whole world sat down and watched Blazing Saddles together, we'd end racism in a night. I mean, that's just the way that I view it. We can laugh about it. You acknowledge the 800-pound gorilla. You move on with your life, and we all see that we're really the same, and we all had a shared experience, and that's that. But I do know that I'm glad that you were there. I do know that you deserved to be there. You are a phenomenal horseman, and you've got a great perspective and a great way of being able to share your gift with people. And whether you think you can connect with people well or not, I certainly think you can. I think you are almost a savant in that aspect of doing stuff. I'm not a big fan of the emotional kind of stuff, but you do it in such a way that I don't feel like you're disingenuous or manipulative. Yes.
It's who I am in the world, you know? It's not a show. It's who I am in the world, and I think that the important part for me, I'm walking down. I have my lessons that I have to go to, but let's stay on the phone. I think the important part to me is that I think that tradition, like I said, is really big on image, and like authenticity is identity, and all of this, and health, and how in the end, if we can allow identities to move beyond tradition, then you know what we're left with is good technique and results. And I think that that's what we're growing up into, and it's really important to just acknowledge where everybody is at and not stay stuck, right? I think because the thing is that this conversation is valuable because we don't want to stay stuck in what we've inherited. And I think that if we don't see race, then we have to make sure that everybody has the same opportunities, that not being the same, that say white people have than black people. Like, let's make a world where we really don't need affirmative action to be in place for women or people of color. You know, there's all of these things, and like if we can get enough people to agree, then we can make some changes happen. You know?
Absolutely.
I think that that's a really important place to be, and what I really appreciate about this conversation is that you've invited me, you have the courage to invite me to ask me how I feel about it, and you also feel safe enough to dive in, which really means to me that like you really care about people regardless of the place. I'm gonna open my arena door real quick. Hold on. Regardless of being the white conservative guy that you said you are, like your heart is for people, and it feels like you really care, and like sometimes the frustration is just not not being able to talk without being judged for having a different opinion. And I really appreciate that, because I go through the world, Daniel. I very much go through the world with the idea of not knowing if every place, most places that I go to are going to be safe for me,
Well,
are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're just frozen on the screen. The reception isn't so good in my arena. And so, I think that being able to hear each other and have these conversations honestly, and for no other, I think that the world changes on a large scale from changes on a small scale. And I think that systems between people change because of the relationships that people have with each other. And I think that this is a really important and wonderful start. And I'm really just happy that we're able to share this space together, man.
Me too. I've been looking forward to our chat with you. I hope we get to ride together face to face down the road somewhere. I really want to meet your mom one day. Yeah, please tell her that I said hey when we get done with our conversation and everything. Seems like a pretty neat lady, and all from what you've told me about her. And I certainly appreciate you coming on and having. I don't think this last part of the conversation can be classified as anything but brave. To be willing to have this discussion publicly is, like you said, something that needs to happen.
Well, you asked me in the beginning what my superpower would be if I had one. And my superpower would be unlearning how to be afraid. And this right here in this moment is that. It's unlearning how to be afraid. It's challenging the systems that say that Daniel and Nahshon, from their respective lives, we have this straight conservative white guy from the South and this queer black guy from Colorado. They shouldn't be able to have conversations together because there's no common ground. Who the fuck said there's no common ground? I didn't give permission for there to be no common ground between me and you, because I didn't know you enough to see whether there was or not. And regardless of what we agree about anything, a disagreement doesn't have to mean disrespect. You know what I'm saying? And it
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean that we have to disagree on everything, right? Like, I don't want to live your life, and I sure as hell don't want you to live mine, but I would like to be your friend if that's possible.
Oh, it's more than possible,
you know what
man.
I'm saying?
We are friends, I hope. Are you saying you don't think we're friends?
I'm just saying, like, this is how I see it. Because all the shit that is supposed to matter, when we really get down past what everybody expects us to be and with each other, it doesn't matter. Because there's no need for me to be afraid of you.
There isn't.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no need for me to be afraid of you. And the only reason it's not giving up race, and it's not doing anything else. It's choosing to let you matter to me. That's how change is going to come. No matter between who. Black people, white people, queer people, straight people, cops and communities. It's going to come from us saying to each other that you matter enough to me for me to care about you. Holiness is not an abstraction. It's just care. It's mutual consideration. I dare say it's love. It's love in everything. You know what I'm saying? It's Mateo walking around the arena when the doctors all say that there's no hope because he has bone-on-bone arthritis. Is this horse ready to go? Does he want to leave yet? No. Just because we don't know the answer he's supposed to be put down, just because we don't know the way forward in having a way forward in healthy cultural and race relations, like that means that we can't have the conversation exploring them without anger. That doesn't seem fair to me. And I think that this conversation is brave on both of our parts, and I think it's very needed. And I think it's very important. And I really appreciate you having the courage to ask me this question. But I, my friend, have got to go. I've got to teach. And so we will, if we need to recalibrate and redo it and do more, let's set up some time, okay?
That sounds good. I think we're good for the podcast, but you and I will definitely talk in the future as we have been through the past. So thank you for coming on, man. I've appreciated every minute of this. I was not sure how that last question was gonna go, and man, I can't imagine a better way for it to have gone.
Listen,
so thank you for that.
I trust you as my friend, which means that I'm safe inside of your questions. And isn't that the heart of training a horse? Isn't that the heart of what we do? They have to feel safe inside of our questions. And if we can do it for them, why the fuck can't we do it for each other?
Very well said.
All right, I gotta go.
All right.
Send my regards to your family, man.
Will do. Thank you, Nahshon. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.